Good evening, Rowan. It's the 9th of September 2016, and it's about 10 o'clock in the evening. And obviously, I'm making you my usual Friday evening video to reassure you that I haven't been seducing any priests over the weekend. Now, no doubt you would have been hoping I was going to turn up at Hinsley Hall in Leeds, where you were this week, only £4 bus ride away, there and back, I mean, in order to seduce you, because I know you're convinced that you're absolutely gorgeous, and if you do a lot of evil things to me and have everyone else do a lot of evil things to me, then you're going to force me to give you what you want. So bad luck. And I held off arresting you at Hinsley Hall because I know you will have been wanting me to turn up and to start negotiating with you. And you thought this would be the occasion when you were going to achieve what you wanted. And I dare say that you were staying at Hinsley Hall overnight as well, because it's a residential place. You can stay there, and this was a private conference that was going on, so I might have turned up to arrest you, but I wasn't sure that I would be allowed into where you were in order to arrest you. So I didn't really want to waste £4, so I bought some frozen mango instead. Which is a lot more pleasant than having anything to do with you. But that doesn't mean I won't be arresting you in the future, just because I didn't come to Hinsley Hall, because I didn't know if I would be able to access you in order to arrest you. Plus, I thought you'd be trying to entice me into your bedroom. Or you'd be trying to pay me off or something like that, which you keep alluding to. You have done in the past anyway, on things that have been put on the internet. So anyway, this evening I thought we could carry on our little chat about the lunatic lecture that you gave at Durham University on the 1st of June. I already made one video about it earlier in the week. And it's quite a long lecture with questions as well. It goes on for over an hour and a half, and there's so much lunacy in it. If I were to cover every aspect of it, there'd probably be 100 videos. So I've zoomed forward tonight to a question that's at the end. Now, you're supposed to be talking about Christian unity in this lecture, and you talk about people on each side of a debate listening to each other. That's one of your common themes, but you never listen to anybody. You just don't want any debate to be resolved. And I've made videos about this before, and other people have also commented on your aversion to closure. You never want anything to be decided and people to move on and deal with whatever's been decided, whether they like it or not, and just get on with other things. You're always keeping everything up in the air and as confused as possible, to enable you to manipulate people to go in the direction that you want, because having no decisions made creates a lot of anxiety in people, and you're trying to get everyone to have as much anxiety as possible that they will welcome any outcome that resolves the issue and enables them to move on. And this is why you've had all of this done to me as well. You won't allow closure. It's always going to be over every day, several times a day, and this has been going on for 8 years. People just lying to me all day, every day. Like I don't just realise that they're lying and there's no point taking any notice of them. So this is what you've done to me, and you also did it previously. I mean, before all of this started 8 years ago, this is what you were doing to me over and over again, in the Church of England, kind of dangling a carrot in front of me, but every time I reached for it, you'd snatch it away. And all of this was supposed to cause so much anxiety and confusion that I'd do anything, particularly to get the outcome I wanted, but I'd do anything just to resolve the issue and be able to move on, which obviously the end game of that was me being under your control and giving you whatever you wanted. And I've made several videos about that as well. So you're always talking about this dialogue between people and this debate, and you just have to draw everything out as long as possible and cause as much stress and confusion to everybody, because that's the process. This is a principle of Freemasonry, actually, order out of chaos. First, you have to create all the chaos, and then you can form from the chaos of society, which is what it means in the Masonic sense. You can create out of the chaos that you've caused into society the outcome that you want. And this is the way the New World Order operates as well, on these Freemasonic principle, which is also the principle of other secret societies that are kind of at higher echelons than the Freemasons generally are. So this is a strategy of the New World Order of secret societies, and it's also a strategy that you employ personally. So you like to keep the debate going and all the questions opened all the time, forever perhaps, to engineer things in the direction you want them to go. So anyway, somebody asks you a question about the Brexit vote. Now, the Brexit vote was on the 23rd of June, and you're speaking here on the 1st of June. So you've been talking about this debate in the church and about people disagreeing about various things. And you like to keep everyone together arguing so they can't be getting on with anything else. So the person asks, I'll play the whole question at the end, basically, what about the Brexit vote and seeing the point of view of the people who've got the opposite opinion to you? So you say, what I found dispiriting, to put it mildly, about the debate is that it's been figured almost entirely as a what makes us better off debate in the tightest, narrowest possible sense of that. So I suppose you mean that the people who wanted to leave the European Union thought that would be better for Britain or better for them, and the people who wanted to stay in the European Union also thought that that would be better for Britain or better for them. So whichever way they saw the outcome being the best outcome, either staying in the European Union or leaving the European Union, the reason they held that opinion was because they thought whichever it was would be better for them or better for Britain. So you then go on to say, what if, again, we were able to discern in each other's arguments there a genuine question about what's all right? Let's put it in plain terms. So I've commented on you making statements like this before. You normally say, let's put it bluntly, but you've said, let's put it in plain terms on this occasion, which means more or less the same thing. And as I've said before, whenever you make a statement like this, you can guarantee that the next thing you're going to say is the biggest heap of crap you could possibly hope to hear in your entire lifetime. And another occasion when you did this, when you said, let's put it bluntly, you were talking about interfaith dialogue, and you said, let's put it bluntly, the people who engage in it are the confident ones, they're the ones who are confident about their faith, and the people who withdraw from it are the ones who may be less confident in what they believe, which I already gave long explanations of reasons why, a variety of reasons why people may or may not engage in interfaith dialogue. So I won't go over all that again now, but really the majority of people just haven't got the time for interfaith dialogue. So it's complete nonsense to say that people who engage in it are confident about their faith and people who don't engage in it are not confident about their faith. So here you've used a similar technique, let's put it in plain terms, and then the next thing you're going to say is the biggest load of crap you could ever possibly hope to hear. So here it is. What's the moral role of this country in the wider world? In a world where actually boundaries and national sovereignty don't mean what they once meant, and many of the historic alliances and power blocks don't mean what they once meant. So this is just some complete obfuscation here, because a lot of people who wanted to leave the European Union are very proudly British people. They want Britain as a nation, or their own country within Britain, as separate from the European Union. They see that as being the best thing for Britain, and that somehow our national identity and sovereignty is compromised by being part of the European Union, which indeed it is actually, because a bunch of people in Brussels who haven't been elected by anybody either in this country or in any of the other member states make a lot of decisions. These are called European directives, and they give them to the parliaments of the member states. These are directives, and the parliaments of the member states have to pass them into law. There's absolutely no option about that. It's a completely undemocratic system. It's a Stalinist dictatorship. So to say this is an argument for staying in the European Union anyway, that boundaries and national sovereignty don't mean what they once meant. Well, that's the whole point, surely, for a lot of people. They want British boundaries and sovereignty to mean what it once meant, or something resembling that. And they don't want to be dictated to by the European Union. So voting to leave was a recognition of the fact that national sovereignty didn't mean what it once meant, and an attempt to restore it. And of course, many people who voted to leave the European Union don't really buy into the notion of nations and states anyway. So that's completely irrelevant. They just know, like I know, that the European Union is part of the agenda of the New World Order. It was Hitler's plan for Europe. This is taken straight from the Third Reich. And it was all decided, a European state and a European currency, at the Bilderberg Group in the 1950s. It had all been decided. Nobody had any say in it. Everything's just been engineered in that direction. So this is just complete lunacy, to be saying, oh, well, Brexit's kind of irrelevant, and what is the moral role of this country in the wider world, where actually boundaries and national sovereignty don't mean what they once meant. Well, a lot of people wanted them to mean what they once meant, and that's why they voted to leave. You're completely mad. I don't know how anybody can possibly reason in this way. It's just like your thoughts are chaotic, or rather that you haven't got an argument, so you've got to make it sound like you're adopting the moral rule and the moral high ground, which is a strategy of yours, which I've talked about before, creating your moral persona. So, what's the moral role of this country in the wider world, in a world where actually boundaries and national sovereignty don't mean what they once meant, and many of the historic alliances and power blocks don't mean what they once meant? Well, let's just talk about the moral role of this country in the wider world then, ignoring the fact that we're not a collective anyway. So, who's going to decide that for us? The New World Order and you, I suppose, since you were talking about a global system of taxation in a sermon you gave in a church in Copenhagen in 2009 at the Copenhagen Climate Summit, and you were you've talked on other occasions about global redistribution of wealth as well, although you've laid off that quite recently. But let's talk about the moral role of this country in the wider world. And I'm going to relate it to something you said in another lecture in a minute. Well, let's think about what you've been doing in relation to the moral role of Britain in the wider world. Well, you provided all that propaganda from 9/11 for a start, which led us into wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. So what's your moral role in this then, that you provide this propaganda? You talk about the moral role of Britain, and your associate globalist puppet Tony Blair, who appointed you, lied to Parliament to get us into an illegal war, and you provided propaganda for this war, and you're talking about the moral role of Britain in the wider world when Britain went to war with Iraq that was no threat to us, which is so far away we can hardly imagine it. And you're talking to people about the moral role of Britain in the wider world when all those Iraqis have been murdered and countless people in Afghanistan as well, and there's people being tortured in Guantanamo Bay, all over the lies that you've been telling, and you're talking about the moral role of Britain in the wider world. Now, I'm just going to comment briefly before I go on to the rest of what you said in this clip I'm going to play this evening. Now, this is a lecture that you gave. Well, not a lecture, you were in dialogue with someone, and you were talking about sustainable prosperity or something like that, and you were in this dialogue. And here's one of the things that you said in this dialogue. This was around the same time, about May, you had this dialogue, but the video's actually only been uploaded onto YouTube this week. And you say, I would love to live in a society where people were proud of the levels of tax they paid. In a well-run, democratic society, a realistic level of taxation would represent that interconnectedness that we live from. And then the person who's dialoguing with you suggests that tax is a kind of sharing, and you agree with this and say tax is a kind of sharing. And then you say that there's an assumption deeply entrenched that tax is an alien imposition. Somebody out there is taking our money, robbing us of our goods, and rather than seeing it, this is taxation, as the circulation of blood in the body politic. Well, in relation to the Iraq war, it was quite literally a circulation of blood, wasn't it? Because all this money was stolen from British taxpayers and spent paying armed forces and paying for fuel and living for armed forces in foreign countries and lining the pockets of arms dealers to go and bomb people in a country who'd never done anything to us, murdered 1 million people on the basis of propaganda that you and others like you provided. And the only way that they were able to do this was because of taxing the British people. I'm talking about this country's role now in the wider world. Obviously, they were doing that in the United States as well and some other countries. But I'm talking specifically about Britain now, that without taxation, Tony Blair couldn't have launched an illegal war on Iraq and led to the murder of all those people. So you're talking about tax is a kind of sharing. I just don't know what planet you're living on. Do you actually believe this shit that you're coming out with? Because another thing that taxation is paying off a national debt to the banksters. We only have a national debt because of all these wars. Anyway, we didn't have any debt before the wars of the 20th century. So this is the reason we've got all this debt and we've got such high levels of taxation in this country. So when you say tax is a kind of sharing, well, who are we sharing with? Where the majority of people in this country, the poor people, are paying all this tax, not only on income or on things that we own, but also on essential goods like some kinds of food, clothing. We have to pay it on water, on electricity, on gas. We're just taxed for breathing, basically, in this country. And who are we sharing it with? I think the Iraqis would have rather we weren't sharing our tax money with them. You're a complete nutcase. I mean, just picture this situation. Tony Blair lies to Parliament, launches an illegal war on Iraq, but he hasn't got any money from taxation. So he has to say to the British people, the vast majority of whom were against the Iraq war, he has to say, look, I want to start a war with Iraq. Could you donate some money so I can buy all these weapons and pay the army and all this kind of thing? There would have been no war with Iraq. Britain wouldn't have been at war with Iraq. So to talk of taxation as a kind of sharing when it's being spent on all these nefarious activities anyway, I just don't know what planet you could possibly be living on. And of course, it's also lining the pockets of your bankster controllers. And impoverishing the people of the whole world, not just in the Western world or the more affluent world. It's impoverishing people everywhere. Taxation. It's just utterly ludicrous. Utterly ludicrous. What's the moral role of this country in the wider world? And the second point I want to make about the moral role of this country in the wider world, even if we assumed that we're a collective and we have a moral role in the wider world, apart from not invading other countries and bombing them and so on, if we imagine that we do have a moral role in this country, well, I don't think you're equipped to be making any decisions about it, are you? Because you can't even keep your own trousers zipped up, can you? You can't stop lying. You lie about absolutely everything. You've ruined quite a lot of people. You've driven people to suicide. You're providing all this propaganda for 9/11, and you think you can be making moral judgments about what a whole nation of people should be doing. I don't even know what to say about it. It's so insane. So, even if we were to assume that Britain has a moral role in the world, we really don't want you making a decision about what that is. So, anyway, you go on to say, I'm back on this lecture at Durham University now. Those of us who are wary, let's say, of Brexit, feel that the notion of British withdrawal is in danger of slipping back to what's frankly a mythical view of national sovereignty and independence. Well, it doesn't really need to be mythical, does it? It could be actual. And we could certainly withdraw from all those decisions that are forced on us by the European Union. What kind of cheese people can make in various parts of Europe and the country and that kind of thing. It's just utterly ridiculous. That's one of their more benign decisions, by the way. So then you say, those who make a serious moral case on the Brexit side, like Giles Fraser. Now, Giles Fraser is an Anglican clergyman. He's very prominent because he's always in the media and he's got a column in The Guardian, and he resigned from St Paul's Cathedral after they were going to evict the Occupy protesters, most of whom weren't even staying in their tents overnight anyway, because you could see the police thermal imagery from the police's thermal imagery cameras, and there was no one in a lot of those tents overnight. So they weren't really occupying, they were just leaving their tents there and pretending to be occupying. But anyway, Giles Fraser resigned because St Paul's Cathedral decided to evict the Occupy people who weren't even there most of the time anyway. And he's also a communist as well. You can find his videos on YouTube where he's promoting Marxism and calling it Christianity. And there's also videos on YouTube where he says that there's no afterlife as well. He often appears on Thought for the Day on Radio 4 and programmes like that. So Giles Fraser is another member of Anglican clergy who isn't a Christian and is a Marxist. I wouldn't like to say whether he's working for the New World Order or not. Uh, I've been too busy researching you. But anyway, that's Giles Fraser. So you say those who make a serious moral case on the Brexit side, like Giles Fraser, are saying, well, what's so magical about Europe in a world which is so complex and where we may just be tied into a collective continental selfishness? So I don't even know if that's what Giles Fraser did say, but given that you lie about what everyone else says, maybe it isn't his opinion at all. Um, so you're considering this to be a moral argument, then, aren't you? That we should be thinking of ourselves in terms of a role in the wider world in Britain, where minding our own business and not invading other countries would be quite a good starting point. So, just saying, I really need to be able to support myself and look after my family. Because you don't care about your children, do you, even? Because you've sold their future down the river as well by trying to bring in this tyrannical one world government and depopulation agenda. So the majority of people in Britain have children. And they care about their children and they think about the future and what's going to be best for their children. And you don't actually care about anyone except yourself, so you'll keep spouting this globalist crap, most of which I think that you know is bollocks. Otherwise, you'd have come up with a reasonable argument for it, probably, because you don't care about your children, you only care about yourself. So you're accusing other people of being selfish for considering the best interests of themselves and their children, even though this is what normal adults do. Whereas you're considering only yourself, only your own interests. You've sold yourself, you've sold us all to promote your own personal agenda, and yet you're making out like it's you who has the moral argument that Britain should have some moral role in the world when you've provided all this propaganda that's led to people being murdered in various countries that don't even have anything to do with us. So you then go on to say, I would hope that in the wake of whatever happens, it may be possible for people to recognise that there have been motives like those around on both sides. So you're talking about both sides of Brexit being magnanimous, and some people have, those who've been considering Britain or Europe's role in a wider world anywhere. But people who only think it would be best for me, or it would be best for my family, or it would be best for Britain, are really selfish because they're not as caring, magnanimous, and expansive as a psychopath like you, who doesn't even care about his own children and can't keep his trousers zipped up. So you say, but at present, because the interest of a lot of politicians and a huge amount of the media is as polarised and as uncompromising and stupid a debate as possible, I'm not holding my breath. Well, the point is, if you're convinced we should leave or you're convinced we should stay, and you've got reasonable arguments for that, then you're not really going to be swayed by anything that anyone else says on the matter, are you? And people who were informed about what the European Union really was were immediately convinced that Britain should leave. Not only Britain, but every other member state should leave the European Union as well. It's a Stalinist dictatorship. It's not only the best for Britain, it's the best for everybody in Europe and also in the rest of the world. So you then say, I think, and this is a rather glum note on which to end, we have a crisis of political culture in this country at the moment, which shows itself in that repeated drift towards the most polarised, the least intelligent statements and positions, the construction and maintenance of a narrower and narrower political class, more and more isolated from the actual professional business of the country. Well, that is true, actually. There are more career politicians than there used to be, a political class that's more separate from the rest of people in Britain than used to be the case. But you're using your usual technique here, aren't you, of polarising people's positions like you did in relation to individualism and collectivism, like saying that either you're completely and utterly selfish and only think about yourself, or your whole identity is going to be entirely subsumed into the collective. And you also said this in relation to God as well, what you would do if you were God. You pretended you were talking about other people, but you were talking about yourself. And you said, oh, well, if I were God, either I'd let everybody off every infraction, or I'd clamp down on everybody all of the time about everything. So it's you who tends to polarise things, really. And other people like me find this immature approach of yours quite tiring. So you then go on to say, and this is the last paragraph, the media culture, which, focusing on personality and celebrity, reduces so many matters to whose side are you on and whose points are you clocking up. Well, it's true that media culture does focus on personality, but that worked to your advantage, didn't it? Because they were always telling everybody that you were a genius and that you were very holy and spiritual and close to God. And they may have said that you said stupid things on various things, like Sharia law, for example. You were attacked in the media about that. But this was generally put down to the fact that you were such a genius academic that you were somehow out of touch with the real world. So even if you made a mistake about anything, the only reason for that was because you were so brilliant. And this is the persona that the media created. But before the media were creating it, for people generally in Britain, this persona was already being created and circulated widely in Anglican circles. So you say this cult of personality reduces so many matters to whose side are you on and whose points are you clocking up. Well, you're talking here about all your clocks saying 9/11, aren't you? So I know whose side you're on. You're on the side of the globalists. You're being puppeteered by the globalist tyranny, at the top of which is the criminal banksters, and you're being puppeteered and being handled by people further down the line in the intelligence agencies. And whose side are you on? Well, you're on Satan's side, aren't you? You present yourself as saving people from all these terrible mistakes they're making, like voting to leave the European Union, and so on. When in reality, your real agenda is exactly the opposite. You are, in fact, an antichrist. You're not the saviour. You're the instigator of tragedy and destruction. So you say this is all reduced to whose side you are on and whose points you're clocking up. I think we're in a really bad way. Well, you're in a really bad way, aren't you? You've got a psychological age of less than 5 years old. You've sold your soul to Satan, and everyone on the entire planet knows what a scumbag you are, so you're in a bad way. And you say, I really do. Oh, this is think we're in a bad way. I really do, and I think that it's quite important for Christian communities to work at making better sense of solidarity in our wider society, in ways in which, of course, many do already. All those churches that are involved in food banks, all those churches that are involved in, like some of the institutes in London, that are really struggling to bring this conversation into relation with politics and the life of Westminster and the city. So I don't know what institutes you're talking about there, but I hope they're not obfuscating and working for the New World Order just like you are. And of course you'll be chivvying them along, telling them they have to stay and convince politicians to stay in the EU and to give lots of money to the United Nations and that kind of thing, won't you? So this is the end of the last comment you make about this question now about Brexit. There's quite a lot going on We really need to put our shoulder to the wheel there. Otherwise, we've got a couple of decades of rather barbarous politics ahead of us. So I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. Is that what your handlers told you? Anyway, I shall play these couple of clips now, and then I'll make a comment about my beloved in a minute.
You've very helpfully constructed in a number of different dialogues how one side might positively affirm something in the other side that points them towards Christ. I wonder if, and recognising that you pinned your colours to the mast in the last few days on the matter, how you might be able to identify ways in which two sides of a debate that will have an outcome on the 23rd of June might talk to each other in an affirmative kind of way after that debate has had its outcome.
Yes, well, theology is relatively easy compared with this one, isn't it? What I've found dispiriting, to put it mildly, about the debate is that it's been figured almost entirely as a what makes us better off debate, in the tightest, narrowest possible sense of that. What if, again, we were able to discern in each other's arguments there a genuine question about what's, all right, let's put it in plain terms, what's the moral role of this country in the wider world? In a world where actually boundaries of national sovereignty don't mean what they once meant. And many of the historic alliances and power blocks don't mean what they once meant. Those of us who are wary, let's say, of Brexit feel that the notion of British withdrawal is in danger of slipping back to what's frankly a mythical view of national sovereignty and independence. Those who make a serious moral case on the Brexit side, like Charles Fraser, are saying, well, why, what's so magical about Europe in a world which is so complex, and where we may just be tied into a collective continental selfishness rather than just a national one? Now, those are the issues that are worth, I think, teasing out. What is the moral role of a country like ours in a world like ours? I would hope that in the wake of whatever happens on the 23rd, it may be possible for people to recognise that there have been motives like those around on both sides. But at present, because the interest of a lot of politicians and a huge amount of the media is in as polarised and uncompromising and stupid a debate as possible. Again, I'm not holding my breath, I fear. I think this is a rather glum note on which to end. I do think we have a crisis of political culture in this country at the moment, which shows itself in a repeated drift towards the most polarised, the least intelligent statements of positions. The construction and maintenance of a narrower and narrower political class, more and more isolated from the actual professional business of the country. The media culture, which, focusing on personality and celebrity, reduces so many matters to whose side are you on and whose points are you clocking up. I think we're in a bad way. I really do. And I think it's quite important for Christian communities to work at making better sense of solidarity in our wider society, in ways which, of course, many do already. All those churches that are involved in food banks, all those churches that are involved in, like some of the institutes in London that are really struggling to bring this conversation into relation with politics and the life of Westminster and the city. There's quite a lot going on. We really need to put our shoulders to the wheel there. Otherwise, we've got a couple of decades of rather barbarous politics ends.
I would love to live in a society where people were proud of the levels of tax they paid. You know, because I think in a well-run democratic society, a realistic level of taxation would represent that interconnectedness that we live from.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not holding my breath. I'm really not holding my breath. But I do feel that
you
sorting
pay tax
out...
as a kind of sharing.
Yeah, tax is a kind of sharing. And the various ways in which we've colluded over the years with less than transparent and less than equitable tax arrangements is a bit shameful. We're waking up to it, bit by bit. I have a bit of an axe to grind in that this has been a major policy priority, thank you, for Christian aid in recent years. And slowly, as I say, we're catching up with an issue which we've allowed to drift because of this assumption, deeply entrenched, that tax is an alien imposition. Somebody out there is taking our money, and thank you, robbing us of our goods, rather than seeing it as just part of the circulation of blood in the body politic.
Right, so obviously I have seen My Beloved again this week. In fact, I was chatting with him when I could have been arresting you in Headingley. So that's another reason why I didn't come, because I didn't want, because he knows what a pervert you are, so I didn't really want to be in the same building with you that has a residential faculty, because you're such a pervert, you say. So I didn't want him feeling uncomfortable about that at all. So that's another reason why I didn't come to arrest you in Headingley, apart from the fact it was a private conference and I didn't know whether I'd get anywhere near you or not. So I am going to be arresting you, as I've said. So don't forget to be alert, and it may even be tomorrow at Girton College at the conference of the Prayer Book Society. But before then, of course, I shall be having a bit of a sleep, and I shall be dreaming about my beloved, who's just so gorgeous. And I've actually got my new silk sheets on the bed at the moment. I've never had black sheets before. They look really nice. And the silk feels absolutely wonderful against my skin. I thought I'd just try them out and make sure that everything was going to be perfect for when I'm together with my beloved. And as soon as you're in prison, I shall be scattering some rose petals over my silk sheets, and everything is just going to be perfect and ready for when we're together. And it's really keeping me going, thinking about that moment. And I still can't thank you enough for bringing us together, for putting that idea in my head. Oh, it's just going to be such a wonderful life without you to worry about anymore, and all your crap about the New World Order on top of all of that. And I shall be together with my beloved. He'll be whispering sweet nothings in my ear with that sexy Welsh voice. North Wales, obviously. He's a gog. And I'll be able to run my fingers along his clean-shaven jawline. It's just going to be wonderful. I'm thinking about it every moment. I'm dreaming about it all night long. So I'll leave it there for now. But don't forget to be alert. Hasta la próxima.
Change me, you're wasting your time. Now I got something much better in mind. Robert De Niro's waiting, talking Italian. I want you thinking.
What care I for a goose feather bed? She's turned down so bravely, oh. Tonight I'll sleep by my lover's side, along with the raggle-taggle gypsies, oh.
I don't like if you love me, love me, love me. I'll drive you, drive you
This is why
crazy.
Catholics have the best sex.